You're listening to Criticaleye's Inspiring Leaders podcast. Criticaleye is a global membership community with over 2 decades of experience supporting senior executives in their roles. We work with board-level executives, giving them opportunities to build their knowledge, skills, and access independent reference points outside of their immediate networks. Whether you're stepping up into a more senior role or aspiring to do so, looking to hone high-level stakeholder relationships, drive operational performance, build your own personal resilience as a leader, or have longer-term career goals such as moving into a plural career, Criticaleye's approach supports a range of leadership challenges and ambitions.
Hi everyone, and welcome back to Criticaleye's Inspiring Leaders podcast. I'm Bridgette Hall, Senior Editor here at Criticaleye, and today I'm joined by Jacky Simmonds, Chief People Officer at Experian. Jacky leads the global people agenda across 32 countries, and she's been at the center of Experian's transformation, shifting how the organization builds capability, supports leaders, and prepares for what's next. We last spoke well over a year ago about some of the work that was underway, particularly the move towards thinking in a more skills rather than jobs, and the early steps Experian was taking to explore how AI could improve how work gets done, and as well as how people are supported. So since then, the pace has only accelerated, and many organizations are asking the same question: what actually sticks, especially when you're trying to scale AI in the real world? So I'm excited to hear what's genuinely worked, what hasn't, and I guess what Jacky sees for the future of a lot of organizations. So Jacky, welcome. So great to have you back.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
And I thought a good way to kind of get us started as we head into 2026. For you, what are some of the emerging trends you think CPOs should be watching to really stay ahead when it comes to digital and AI transformation?
Yeah. I think if I'm honest, it's probably not too dissimilar to what we spoke about last time, with the pace of technological change and what that means. And I think since we spoke last time, generative AI and how companies adopt that has accelerated probably much faster than we would have anticipated. So I think the trends are really, what does that actually mean, not only in terms of skills, but in terms of ways of working. So, a number of employers, including Experian, are thinking about, what are the skills that we need most? So, for a business like us, it's not only about the really extreme technical elements of AI, it's generally much more thinking about how do we get everybody AI fluent? How do we do that in a safe way that kind of with the right governance, etc. So the digital transformation is still a massively major trend. But I think that, the big challenge for CPOs, I think, is how do you do that and communicate to your employees with clarity, confidence, and a sense that the technology is going to make their life better, not more stressful. So I would say that's probably one of the bigger trends that shifted since the last time we spoke, Bridgette.
Yeah. It struck me last time that you guys were, I think, quite advanced at that time compared to a lot of organizations that I spoke to. And I'm just wondering, what is some stuff that you felt was been really kind of successful in your AI rollout, and what have you seen?
Yeah, well, what we did since, I think when we spoke last time, we had really embarked upon building our digital academy really in quite a sort of scalable way that would provide just learning content more generally. I think in the last sort of year to 18 months, that's been really focused on building AI fluency. So we built a Gen AI Academy since then. And we've also just launched a new initiative internally, which is a platform called My Career, where every employee can upload their own skill set, and then that can be matched to learning, personalized learning, but it also can be matched to potentially future jobs or career paths. And that's all powered by AI, and that wasn't in place before. And that does a number of things to us. It allows, obviously, employees to sort of take control of their own learning, but it also gives us a greater picture, a more accurate picture of the skills that we've got internally and what the gaps are, from maybe where we might need to recruit. It's in its infancy, but I think that's going to help us, because actually trying to identify the skills you need is really quite difficult with a new technology where you don't always know what you don't know. And so there's new skills emerging. And I think that's been a really big shift since we last spoke. And the other thing that we did is we introduced a AI leadership coach called Nadia. And I don't know if we spoke about that last time, whether that might have been in pilot mode.
I think so, yeah.
But that's something that's really taken off, and people are using that everywhere to set goals, to sort of help with their workflows. And so that's been a really big initiative that's taken place, as well as us building kind of programs for our leaders about how they lead with AI and what that means, and what are the things that they need to sort of think about. So those are some of the big shifts that we've made since the last time we spoke.
Is there any kind of tough lessons that you've had to learn, or where do you think is like somewhere that a lot of leaders what do you think they're getting wrong when it comes to AI?
I would maybe wouldn't say it's about getting wrong. I think firstly, getting everyone to embrace it is, it is a big piece of work. You get some people who naturally do it. But you also get some people who might be fearful of it, or might get concerned about how it might impact their job. So I think, one of the first things we've learned is to, it's not a one and done. You have to kind of keep at it. You have to sort of really build fluency. You have to kind of create environments where everyone knows it's okay to do that. And you have to sort of have a test environment as well, where people are using it in their kind of workplace and using it to improve their own productivity without any any issues associated with that. So I think that would be one lesson we've learned. I think the other lesson we've learned is kind of working with leaders around how they help their teams embrace it, thinking about some of the governance aspects, how you keep your data safe, etc. So there's been some quite good learnings from that. But I think that the pace of change, the difference with this kind of type of technology is that the pace is so fast. There's an element of learning as you go, taking those lessons and then adapting accordingly. So I think that's been really quite an important part of what we're experiencing at the moment.
Yeah, it is really embedding that very agile mindset.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and kind of linked to that, because you said, like transformation is no longer a one and done. It is this kind of constant rather than a one-off initiative. How do you see the role of the CPO evolving in this kind of environment that's constantly changing?
I think there's a number of things. I mean, if you think about the current situation with technology and AI, I think the CPO and the HR function has kind of as a dual role, actually. It has a role where it's helping the organization think through, how they might apply it, how does that impact jobs, what new jobs do you need, what skills do you need, etc., etc. But also the HR function itself is ripe for utilizing this technology to create a much better digital experience for its employees, making, work that can sometimes be cumbersome when you've got multiple processes, multiple geographies, much easier to get things done. So I think the role of HR and the CPO is really helping the organization navigate those changes, but also start thinking about, well, how do I help my leaders, navigate through that? What programs or learning opportunities do we want to put in place to support them? I mean, one of the things about change, and I think I may have spoke to you about this last time, transformation isn't one and done. It's constantly evolving. There's constantly new things that are coming through. So helping leaders navigate through a lot of ambiguity, help them navigate through, the changes, and also help them understand that they may not have all the answers as leaders, but their role is to try and bring clarity and prioritize. Because one of the things we've experienced with this work is that there's so much opportunity to apply it, but you actually can't do everything. So you have to prioritize that. And that's something that I think leaders sometimes need some help with.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess linked to that, what does it take for a CPO to be viewed as a really like strategic architect of transformation, kind of at board level as well, not just the owner of the people implications?
I think it's probably different in different organizations, but I think I've always found that when sort of the CPO talks about value, and capability and risk, and how that, those are the things that you need to be thinking about as an organization, in terms of how you move it on. I find that that's been very effective in terms of how you contribute to the discussion about, how, what is it that that you're doing in HR, or how you're supporting the business through how they're meeting their strategy. So I never really like to think about change or transformation. I think we may have talked about this last time. I think about what is it that we're doing that's helping the business to execute its strategy. And then when you frame the discussion on HR about how it's contributing to that strategy, I think that's where you get to be seen as far more strategic, because you're actually, helping and demonstrate how you're moving the organization in the right direction.
Yeah. Linked to that, how do you start measuring and kind of demonstrate the impact of that value at an enterprise level? I know we spoke a lot about data last time, and I guess I was just wondering like how you go about really showing kind of the gains that you're getting within this kind of AI digital transformation world.
I think I think there's lots of small gains. We've kind of gone. If I take the HR function as an example, we've looked at how we utilize AI in a whole number of areas, not just in those sort of maybe obvious areas. And so we've got things like how it writes job descriptions faster. We've got how we obviously the leadership coach that we've got. So we've got a whole kind of series of things that we've put in place, and we just try to show the sort of improvements that have been made in each one of those. So, for example, with Nadia, the leadership coach that I spoke to you about, we've been able to show that it's improved where leaders have used it. It's improved their leadership effectiveness score, which we kind of measure. So that's been a really good metric for us to use. In our talent acquisition team, we've been able to show the improvement in days to hire. So I think I may not get this completely right, but I think we've improved that by 4 days, an average of 4 days, which makes a big difference if you're trying to sort of hire scarce tech talent. I think some of the others has been slightly, we're not able to measure quite as much at the moment. So Ask HR, for example, which is our agentic AI, where people will start using that service to be able to ask questions or find out about policies. We know our NPS score has gone up internally, but we don't quite know the total impact of what that is, if there's any value in terms of productivity. So I would say that for us, it's a balance of measures. But what we are committed to doing is measuring and then adapting those measures as we need to, as we're evolving. And I think different parts of our business would measure different things. So we know that we're measuring developer productivity, so those people that code software, and we're able to measure that, and then that's done quite on quite a regular basis, and it's done across everywhere, so people can see where people are using tools and the impact that it has, versus those that are slightly late adopters, and what we publish that so then teams can adapt accordingly. So it's probably a slightly long-winded answer to your question, but I think that we just look at each thing that we're doing and try to measure it in a way that's meaningful to the people that are utilising it.
Yeah. What are some of then kind of the questions you get from the board? Because I know from like some of our research, a lot of the CPOs have been like the biggest kind of demand from their boards is around productivity. And I was just wondering with these kinds of things, what are some of the questions you're being asked?
We get some asks about productivity, but less than you might think, because I think that's probably taken for granted that we would look at that. We get more questions around, has there been an impact on culture? We get a lot of questions about, are we able to hire the right people? Are we attracting the right talent? So we get quite a lot of questions on that. And I've had, about a year ago, I had a lot of questions about what we were doing to skill the organisation, what were the tools that we were using. So we've always had a plan on those things. And sometimes, it's not visible to the board, all the things that you're doing on a day-to-day basis. So you kind of have to sort of make sure that you kind of use the right forums to do that. But we have an annual session with our board on HR. In fact, we just had it last week. So we have an annual people strategy deep dive, and we go through, the progress in the year, but the highlights of the strategy. And that's generally where they ask most of the questions. But if I was to summarize it, it's mostly about talent and capability and skills. And have we got those to, deliver and execute our strategy?
And I guess that kind of links to the risks. Is that like a big risk at the moment as well?
Well, there's always risks in not being able to attract the right talent, but I think most people are completely on top of that all of the time. So local leaders, but also local TA teams, and we now build pipelines so that we know the people we want to attract, and we never take it for granted that we can attract those people because everyone's looking for similar skill sets, but we've now, I think, developed really quite a strong employer brand that's been developed globally. So there's kind of one approach, whatever market we're in. And that has really seen quite a big increase in applications. And we've been lucky enough to be in the Great Place to Work top 25 2 years running. And those placements also saw a big exponential increase in applications as a result of that, and also in technology applications. So we've been really pleased with that. But as I said, we never take it for granted and we're never complacent, and we continue to work hard to attract the right people.
So what then is like some of the bigger risks for you when it comes to kind of AI at the moment?
Well, there's always, I suppose I don't think there's any one big risk. I think we've obviously, we do everything we can to protect our data internally. So we don't allow, on work laptops, we don't allow any of our data to go outside. So I think all those big risks that you would think about, you would expect someone like Experian to be able to manage very carefully. And, we've got strong cybersecurity teams and all the rest of it. And I see that in my own HR organisation. Because the longer you cling to old ways of doing things, the harder it is to move forward. And I think that if I look at the demographics and the younger population, I imagine that they are embracing these tools far greater than maybe different generations are. And I think these tools are also far easier to adopt than some others. And, I talk to quite openly about this to teams. I mean, I worked in an industry for many years in the travel industry that was totally disrupted by technology, had its business model totally disrupted by technology. And so if you live through that and come out the other side with a very strong business, you recognize the signs about where you have to move and be early adopters. I mean, I think Experian is an early adopter on this. I think we're doing all the right things. And that's what I've been kind of pushing my own teams to do, is to adopt this technology and embrace it and learn as much as you can about it. because you will use it in every aspect of your life before we know it.
Fab. I think I have just one more question to kind of wrap us up. What's your top three pieces of advice for CPOs who are currently in the middle of their own digital or tech transformation, to help them kind of unlock value and maintain that momentum and really move at pace, like you were just saying?
Oh, I hate having to give advice to other CPOs. There's lots of people around, that are probably more qualified than me. But I always say, look, start with the work that matters. Pick the things that genuinely will improve outcomes. There's always so much work to do, and so don't try and transform everything at once. And I think, if you look at any research that shows that the biggest wins come from those things that, where you focus on the high value. So that would be my first piece of advice. I think the second thing, and we talked about this slightly, is stop talking about change and help leaders make change feel normal. So becomes part of the rhythm. It's not a big exhausting event. Don't make it a big program of work. Try and just really think about the sequence of things that you need to do, as part of everyday business. And I think that is really helpful when you're kind of going through a big change, and you'll just look back one day and see that big shifts have been made. And I think the third thing I would say, particularly relevant at the moment for HR, don't forget the balance of the things that we're all really great at, which is those kind of people skills. So where everything's getting automated and you're utilizing technology, empathy, problem solving, influencing, all the things that, great CPOs do, they're becoming more and more valuable, not less. And so I think we have a great opportunity to help people provide meaning to people and articulate that. And I think that's where, you can really help the organization move forward if we get the balance right.
Jacky, thank you so much. This has been such a fantastic conversation. Thanks again for sharing what's worked, what you do differently, and lessons you've learned along the way.
Thank you.
And thanks to everyone for listening. If you've enjoyed this episode, please follow or subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and feel free to share it with a colleague who's navigating their own transformation right now. Until next time.